infidelity more frequently than whites as a cause of divorce. Blacks also have more sexual partners than whites. The Kinsey survey found that about twice as many black college graduates had had 6 or more partners before marriage than whites. Many later studies have confirmed this. A survey of 2026 15 to 18-year-olds in Los Angeles in the mid-1990s found that 38% of blacks had had 5 or more sexual partners, 26% of whites, 21% of Hispanics, and only 8% of East Asians. Wow, that's quite a gap. The same differences are found in Britain. In a study of nationally representative sample of approximately 20,000 16 to 59-year-olds carried out in 1990, 36% of blacks had had 2 or more sexual partners during the previous 5 years, compared with 29% of whites and 18% of Asians. And if you haven't realized it yet, psychopathy is heritable. The impulsiveness component of psychopathic personality includes an inability or unwillingness to delay immediate gratification in the expectation of long-term advantage. The first study to demonstrate differences between blacks and whites in the delay of gratification was carried out by W. Michel in Trinidad in the late 1950s. He offered black and white children the choice between a small candy bar now or a larger one in a week. He found black children were much more likely to ask for the small candy bar now, and this difference has been confirmed in 3 subsequent American studies. This was also carried out, it doesn't say here, but in the Caribbean. And it's the same result, really. This racial difference has been noted but given different names by different writers. In the Unheavenly City Revisited, Edward Banfield writes of the, quote, extreme present orientation, close quote, of blacks, and Michael Levine writes of, quote, high time preference, close quote, an economist's term for preferring cash now rather than a greater sum in the future. The APA Diagnostic Manual refers to the psychopathic personalities, quote, instability to sustain consistent work behavior, close quote, and a number of studies have shown that blacks are less motivated to work than whites and Asians, while Hispanics are intermediate. For example, black students do fewer hours of homework than whites and Asians. Among college students with the same scholastic aptitude test scores, blacks get poorer grades than whites, probably because they don't work as hard. This helps explain black unemployment. Several American ethnographic studies of inner-city blacks have concluded that many are unwilling to work. Thus, E. Anderson writes that, quote, there are many unemployed black youth who are unmotivated and uninterested in working for a living, particularly in the dead-end jobs that they are likely to get, close quote. The sociologist S.M. Peterson writes that, quote, it is commonly contended that young black men experience more joblessness than their white counterparts because they are less willing to seek out low-paying jobs. American Asians are the opposite of blacks in this respect. They have low rates of unemployment, and it has been shown by James Flynn that they achieve higher educational qualifications and earnings than would be predicted from their intelligence, suggesting they have strong work motivation. Recklessness, racial recklessness. Psychopaths appear to enjoy taking risks because it stimulates them, and there are several ways in which blacks show greater recklessness and risk-taking than whites or Asians. In the 1989 to 1993 American Teenage Attitudes and Practice Surveys, 9,135 youths aged 12 to 18 were asked to consider the question, quote, I get a kick out of doing things every now and then that are a little risky or dangerous, close quote. 56.9% of blacks agreed, as compared with 38.6% of whites. Driving habits are an index of risk-taking and recklessness. A number of studies have shown that blacks run red lights shown more often than whites and have more frequent accidents. 5 studies have shown that blacks do not use seat belts as often as whites. Hispanics and Native Americans likewise have more accidents caused by recklessness and risk-taking than whites and East Asians. Sexual behavior can be reckless. Among those who do not wish to have children, blacks are less likely to use contraception than whites, and this has been found in both the United States and Britain. One result is that black women have more unplanned babies than whites. In the United States in the 1990s, blacks had about twice the proportion of unplanned babies as whites and Asians. In Britain, a survey of teenage births carried out in 1994 found that these were 3.5 times more common among blacks than among whites and Asians. I mean, golly gee, I could just go on and on and on. I'm gonna choose a random page here because I'm just gonna jump a lot of sources and evidence because I could just go on and on about this. We consider finally the psychopathic characteristic described by the American Psychiatric Association as, quote, inability to function as a responsible parent, close quote. One of the most straightforward measures of this is abuse and neglect. The American Association for Protecting Children has found that black children constitute approximately 15% of the child population and about 22% of cases of child abuse and neglect. The first 1975 and second 1985 National Family Violence Surveys carried out in America examined the use of violence toward children, defined as hitting them with the fist or with some object and kicking, biting, and beating them up. It does not include slapping or spanking. It found that 1.2% of white parents and 2.1% of blacks inflict this kind of severe violence on their children. That is almost 50%. That's almost twice as many. I mean, for centuries, people as different as Arabs and Englishmen have judged Africans to be unintelligent, lascivious, jolly, and keen on rhythm. Today, in whatever corner of the globe one looks, blacks behave in a certain consistent way. We know that testosterone and MAOA is highly correlated with temperament and impulsivity, and inclination or propensity for violence. And aggression easily can become heedlessness of the rights of others. So we should therefore expect black and white standards of behavior to differ. And what do you know, they do. Examples of this difference abound, quote, trash talk, close quote, the stream of arrogant banter with which black basketball players seek to intimidate and humiliate opponents is alien to white ideals of sportsmanship. Likewise, Montel Williams, the host of a television talk show, claimed to have discovered racial bias in a question on an EQ test that asked children what they would do if they threw a baseball through a neighbor's window. The answer scored as correct was offering to pay for the window, but Mr. Williams, who is black, objected that in his old neighborhood a, quote, sorry man, close quote, would have sufficed. No doubt Mr. Williams was right that blacks do attach less urgency than whites to compensating damage. Numerous fights among blacks results from, quote, dissing, close quote, males, seeking dominance over each other by shows of disrespect, a practice that indicates disregard for the golden rule. Moreover, it is hard to imagine a more blatant violation of the golden rule than the constant demand for royalties by Martin Luther King's estate whenever his speeches are published, especially when his own plagiarism is justified as, quote, voice merging, close quote. Consider the remarkable increase in gunshot homicides among black men in the last half-century. In 1943, there were 44 handgun homicides in New York City. 44, 1943. In 1992, 1,500 black males died of gunshot wounds inflicted by other black males. Since 92% of the 2,200 murders recorded in New York that year were committed by blacks, black males must also have killed several hundred non-blacks with firearms as well. The parallel increase in gunshot homicides nationally over the same period is essentially an increase among blacks. Now, the sheer availability of guns does not automatically mean murder. Guns have been available for centuries to whites whom invented and manufactured them. Every adult male Swiss citizen owns a gun, yet the annual homicide rate in Switzerland is 1/200th that of Washington, D.C. or Harlem. 1/200th. The immediate cause of the rise in homicide has been the sudden availability of guns to blacks, who seem ready to resort to firearms in disputes that whites would regard as trivial. Gunfights over calls in pickup basketball games are not uncommon in New York City. It may well be that blacks lack the restraints. Most of us feel distinctively uneasy about doing things we don't want others to do. This higher order desire that our actions conform to general rules that we can also prescribe for others is the essence of morality. A person is said to be conscientious or principled when he subjects his behavior to the golden rule, the "how would I like it if everyone did that" test. Concern for morality, like other traits, is not equally distributed. In Why Race Matters and elsewhere, Michael Levine cites evidence that on average blacks are less concerned than whites about the golden rule. This is clearly suggested by the very high rates of black criminality, not only in the United States, but around the world. At a more mundane level, it is also reflected, for example, in the unwillingness of many blacks to take turns, and a tendency of blacks to, quote, talk back, close quote, to movies, which displays a lack of sympathy with audience members who want to watch in silence. Michael Levine, having taught philosophy for many years to a diverse student body, have been able to compare the preferences and actions of different groups by using a classic philosophical conundrum. When he introduced ethics, he always asks his students what you should do if a supermarket cashier gives you too much change, and there is no chance of discovery if you pocket it. While he has not kept precise statistics, he states, disproportionately more black students says that, quote, you'd be a fool, close quote, to return the money. Many back up their positions by saying that the mistake is the cashier's problem. When he asked what they would do if they were the cashier, many reply irrelevantly that they wouldn't let it happen to them. Here's a moral study conducted intranationally and internationally. And as you can see by the scores, blacks scored the lowest, both in America and in Africa, followed by Arabs, and then followed by whites. And the most moral was Northeast Asian Americans and Northeast Asian countries. And I'll just let you see these for yourself. You can use the pause button, you can read. Now, Asians have higher IQ than whites, but whites tend to be more creative than Asians in creativity studies and personality studies. And it also shows in Nobel Prizes, in inventors, and so forth. Since around the 1980s, a consensus has emerged among psychologists that there are 5 major personality traits. These are openness to experience, neuroticism, introversion, extroversion, conscientiousness, and agreeableness. McCrae and Costa, 1999. Openness to experience is the trait with which we are concerned because it is a measure of creativity, you see. It is defined as, quote, related to scientific and artistic creativity, divergent thinking, and political liberalism. At the core of this dimension is an openness to feelings and new ideas and flexibility of thought, close quote. Wang and Erdheim, 2007, page 1495. McCrae, 1987, has reviewed research on this issue and shown that the openness to experience scale is correlated at around 0.4 with a variety of measures of creativity, including divergent thinking. He concludes that, quote, these data suggest that creativity is particularly related to the personality domain of openness to experience, close quote, page 1258. The 5 personality traits have been measured in samples of the population in 56 countries by Schmidt, Alec, McCrae, and Bennett Martinez, 2007. The means for each country have been calculated in relation to a mean of 50. Standard deviation is 10 in the United States. The means for these countries for openness to experience are given without asterisks in table